Okay. So welcome this morning to our Smith County Master Gardener Association Library Series final event for 2022. We want to thank the Tyler Public Library for allowing us to partner with them to have this event. This is our 5th one this year, and we finally got to come back in person. So hopefully we'll be doing the same thing next year, January through May. So be watching for it. Just a little bit about our program. How many of you in here are interested in becoming a Master Gardener? Yay! Okay. Right. Somebody back there snag her. We have our program. Our education program starts January, February, March. It's 1 day a week. And after that, it's a 1-year internship, and then you become certified. And there is no more wonderful organization to belong to, because when you are outside with the flowers and the trees and the birds and the bees, it just makes you smile. So there's lots of happy people in the garden. To know more about what we do, we work in the Tyler Rose Garden, in the Tyler Botanical Garden of the Tyler Rose Garden, every Tuesday, Wednesday, and every other Saturday. We have 3 main gardens that we maintain there. They are the Idea Garden, which is our teaching garden, the Shade Garden, which is full of camellias, azaleas, and most of all, beautiful maples and other shade type plants. And then we have the Heritage Garden, which originated as the Heritage Rose Garden, and now there's a variety of other heritage plants in that garden. We try to keep that just heritage. The Idea Garden, though, is a great place to visit if you're new to this area and you wonder what grows. You might get an idea. We change that every season, and the folks that work in there are fabulous. Well, in all the gardens. We do a lot of other things. Our mission is education, and so we speak at a lot of groups. If you have a group that is interested in hearing about Master Gardeners or any other part of gardening, contact us at the Smith County Master Gardener Association. We're part of the AgriLife, Texas A&M AgriLife organization, and we are located in the Cotton Belt building, the old building. We're on the lower level, and our office, there's little signage as you walk down the hallway. You'll see signage to our office. And so that's a little bit about us. Quite a few of our members are here, and I am glad to see everybody. I'd like to now introduce our speaker. She is one of us. She is a wonderful person, and you're in for a treat. She's the Vice President of the Smith County Master Gardeners this year. I didn't give you my name, but I'm Belinda Cromer for those of you that don't know me, and I am the President this year, and I have really enjoyed being a part of this group. But Elizabeth is my sidekick, my best friend this year, and I appreciate her more than she'll ever know. She was my garden mentor when I worked in the succulent garden in the Idea Garden. That's her area of specialty for us in the Smith County Master Gardeners, and she does a beautiful job, so you need to visit that area of the garden. She loves plants, birds, insects, and anything that involves outdoors and nature. Her background is broad and her experience is vast. She is a local East Texas girl. She personally has experimented in her own gardens with vegetables and herbs, and all the way to wildflower meadows, sorry about that.
They have wildlife too.
And wildlife, yeah. She also raises chickens and is a beekeeper. She writes, paints, does needlework projects, and all kinds of other arts and crafts. But if you ask me, I would tell you that her special gift is really in providing educational programs and doing speaking events just like this one. You can safely say that Elizabeth has very many talents, and I am very blessed to call her my friend and to learn from her, and you are blessed to get to learn from her today, so I'm going to hand it off to her right now.
Sweet. I don't deserve all that. I really want to thank you guys for being here and allowing me to talk to you about one of my very favorite kinds of gardens. I have told many people the story in the past that the first garden that I ever planted for myself, the first little piece of dirt that I ever claimed, was at the end of a driveway in a house that I was renting. It was in an older part of town with huge trees, and the only sunny place in the entire yard was the driveway. It's the only place that didn't have a tree, either on it or over it. And so when I got my first herbs, I planted them in this little strip at the end of the driveway that was about 8 feet wide and about 18 inches deep. That was it. And then it fell off into this like abyss at the bottom of this hill because they built the driveway up so it would be flat with the rest of the house. And I planted herbs there and I loved it. And that's when I really got the gardening bug, that I just absolutely had to keep things in the ground. Well, after that, I finally got to buy my first house. And the house was an older house because it was a first house, and that's what you buy when you buy your first house. And I had to spend about a year just getting it to where it was livable. I mean, it's one of those things, you move into a house and then suddenly the electricity goes bad, the plumbing goes bad, everything went wrong. So for about a year, I didn't plant much of anything at all. And finally, at the end of that year, I kind of got my feet under me and I started to try to work on the backyard. And I realized that because I was now house poor, I worked all the time. I had Sundays off and I worked till about 8 o'clock at least 4 nights a week. And I was never home to garden. So I'd put stuff in the ground and then I would water them, I wouldn't do anything with them, and they would die. And it was so depressing. In fact, my husband started calling the plants that I would bring home from Lowe's Death Row. So I realized that something had to be done. I had to change what I was doing. And I started researching night gardens. I had read about them somewhere, and I was like, this is kind of an intriguing idea. I want to do this. So because I realized that really the only time I had to work in my yard was in the evenings, most of the time except on Sundays, that this might be the best kind of garden for me to plant. So in my backyard, I planted my first evening garden, and I was kind of vicious. It was monochromatic. The only colors in there were white, really deep purples, and silver, and green, of course. And I didn't allow any other kinds of plants to live there. If they were a different color, they got moved to the front yard. But I really, really fell in love with that garden, mainly because, probably, I could succeed at it. And it was very fragrant, which is something I really like in a garden. So because of that, it has night gardens have a special place in my heart. And currently I don't have a night garden in my garden, but I'm working on building a little tiny sliver of one, kind of near my greenhouse. So I'm putting another one back in, but they are my very favorites. So I may go on. Gardening with a focus on enjoying your garden in the evening or at night can open up a whole new appreciation of plants, color, and fragrance. There are aspects of the natural world that we miss after dark because we close ourselves up in our houses. And the world looks and sounds and smells different at night. Many of us also have a lot more time to spend in the garden in the evenings. We don't have to be at work, we aren't running our errands, we aren't focusing on our social responsibilities at the end of the day, and we can relax and enjoy our gardens because our duties are not as pressing. We can use the garden to decompress and soothe our daytime battered nerves. Imagine yourself for a moment sitting in the evening in a fragrant, pale-flowered garden, listening to the rustle of leaves and sipping drinks by moonlight. If this sounds like a mini vacation to you, night gardens may be your style. This is hard to do this with employed here. The night is more loved and more richly colored than the day. Vincent van Gogh said that, and at first that may sound like a very counterintuitive statement. I mean, how can that be? You can't see as well. But that's the whole point. You can't see as well. So all of your other senses start to overcompensate for the fact that your visual cortex isn't as activated. So you smell more, you hear more. The night opens up these aspects and pathways to our brain that we can't access during the day. And so it is a rich experience. I'm gonna give you a brief history of night gardens because one of the background things about me is my major is actually a history major, which I never really got to use in my professional life. So now I just use it on you guys. The very first gardens that were planted exclusively to be used and viewed at night were the Mughal gardens of India. The Mughals had actually come from northern Iran, the mountains in Persia. And they were used to a totally different climate than what they got in India, which was extremely hot and humid and really sun-drenched. And they couldn't take it. They hated it. So they started planting gardens, walled gardens, that they could use in the evening. And they filled them with these fragrant flowers that they could enjoy in the dim light. They lined them with fountains and cool tiled walkways, lanterns and long benches that exposed them to the breeze. The Moors of North Africa and Spain also built similar evening gardens, taking this habit with them, and therefore brought the idea of night gardens to Europe for the first time. In the Victorian age, a fascination with really fragrant plants became a bit of a mania. Because the British Empire literally spread from one corner of the globe to another, they could import anything they wanted, and it made it cheaper for them to buy plants and propagate plants that were really expensive and fancy. And there also happened to be just enough money and commerce flowing through the economy at the time that a lot of people could afford to build conservatories, hothouses, or just big sunrooms on the ends of their house that they could fill with these exotic plants. Because many highly perfumed plants are white in color and are night blooming or more fragrant in the evening, Victorian gardeners built these conservatories and made them white. They had a lot of white tile floors, they used white ironwork, they used a lot of white benches, so they could actually see in them in the evenings as they were walking around through them. It's a lot easier to navigate in a space where you can see all of your features. And so that is one of the things that kind of influenced people in Europe to build these night gardens around the turn of the last century. Right before World War I, a lot of designers and artists were really tired of the excessive and heavy decoration of the Victorian age. So a movement got started that was called the aesthetic movement, and this is a painting by Whistler of a girl who's dressed in the aesthetic style in an aesthetic style home. They tended to be monochromatic color schemes, and though any color could be used, there's famous pictures of all green rooms or peacock blue rooms, but white was really popular because it was sort of the anti-Victorian look. And they had these oriental aesthetics. That room looks sort of Japanese. Though any color could be used, the association with the extravagance of conservatories soon made white rooms very popular among the elite, and all white decor became a sign of people of very refined and luxurious taste. It also meant you were very rich, because only rich people could maintain an all-white room, because they get dirty. By the 1920s, white gardens were an extension of this fascination, with the white spaces harkening back to the Victorian conservatories. They also focused a lot on scent as well as pale flowers and foliage. This garden literally has only 2 colors in it. Of course, you know, it looks black and white to us. It's probably actually white white and green. But these gardens were really popular, and they were also thought to be most enjoyable on late summer evenings, which is about the only time in England where you have really nice weather and you can hang out outside at night. So night gardens can reflect any style. You can have big, blousy English borders. You can have a simple woodland garden. You can have a dry landscape garden, or just a little quirky backyard. All you need is a light color palette and Moonlight. This is Vita Sackville West Sissinghurst. It is the grand dame of all white gardens. Yes, it is in England. She built this garden. She started on it in 1930. She had made enough money as a writer to be able to buy a historic piece of property that her family had once owned. But the house, which was a Elizabethan house, had completely fallen down, and all that was left were some of the exterior walls. So she built a garden inside what had been her family home. And she built another small house on the property that she lived in, but mainly she lived in that garden. She fell in love with it. And really and truly, you cannot talk to anyone about white gardens or night gardens without Vita's name coming up, because she is the quintessential white gardener. But this is an example of a modern white garden. This is Lady Cholmondeley's garden in Lincolnshire, England. And it's 12 acres, and it's not all white. In fact, she has a front border that's apparently all red and purple, which is very garish to a lot of British people, but I think it sounds really cool. I want to see it. But in her white garden, to try to make a counterpoint to Vita's, which is traditional, she made a very modern-looking garden. It's full of big, huge grasses, and it's got this really cool thing in the center. And there's also a lot of modern sculpture in this garden. But this box hedge in the center that is filled with psyllium is supposed to mirror the Milky Way. This is Ina Garten's vegetable garden, and I can tell you, I have studied this picture deeply. There is not a vegetable in this garden. But apparently, because she lives very far north, it's too cold in the early spring and late winter to plant any vegetables in that garden. So she decks it out as a white garden so that it's still really pretty through the winter and the early spring before she actually plants her vegetables in it. So the box edges stay the same, but the beds get changed out depending on the seasons. This is a Hampton seaside garden, and I love this garden because it's so simple. It's just two narrow beds with box edges on the outside of them that are bisected by a gravel path. But it's so full of these beautiful, blousy white flowers. It's very soothing. It's just a lovely, soothing, easy care garden. That's Vita. The more one gardens, the more one learns, and the more one learns, the more one realizes how little one knows. And I have used that as a quote to illustrate my life for a long time. But my favorite Vita Sackville quote is, "It isn't that I don't like sweet disorder. It's just has to be judiciously arranged." She was a very particular woman. So if you are gardening for the evening, you need to consider about 5 major elements. The first is going to be color, and then fragrance, lighting, sound, and placement are all going to be big things to think about as you are putting together an evening or a night garden. And color, of course, is the most important aspect because pale colors reflect the most light. And you want to be able to see them. Choose plants with white, light yellow, and pale pink blooms. Silver and whiter yellow variegated leaves are the most visible at night. And it is really cool to get something that is variegated on the edges and darker in the center because it looks like they've been cut out. because you can't see the middle of them because they're darker. And it gives you this interesting dimension to your variegation. But don't overlook some somber beauties, because in the early evening garden, deep purple or red foliage and flowers make the most of the waning light because they reflect the ultraviolet spectrum. And that makes them almost shimmer. Human eyes cannot see the ultraviolet spectrum. So what we see, instead of seeing the ultraviolet, is we see this movement. And it is a very cool thing. Now, it lasts only briefly. The sun has to be at a particular angle, and so it's right before it starts to get dark. At that moment, they call it the gloaming in England. But you can see it, and things will kind of throb. So this is Vita's garden. She built it again on the ruins of an abandoned family estate. And it relies really heavily on this very tightly manicured shrubbery. And then stuff is planted inside it. And you can kind of see how her judicious arrangement comes into play here, because it is literally a green and white garden. She does not allow any other colors in this garden. And not only that, she was very particular about things dying pretty. And she said that. If they didn't die well, she would dig them up and move them out of her garden, because she didn't want blooms hanging on her shrubbery that looked like dirty dish rags. So if they looked like that, she would banish them. She wanted plants that they would bloom, the blooms would look beautiful, they would die, and they would fall to the ground. That's what she wanted. And if the plant didn't do that, it held on to its blooms, that she couldn't stand it. But she did have one old rose in her garden that would hold on to its blooms and look like a dirty dish rag. And she loved it so much that she actually would go out every single morning before anybody else could get in the garden and clip all the dead blooms off. So this is a Petite night garden. The elements in this little tiny path-side garden show the restraint of using white as your single bloom color. And they also have used white pretty much as the only color. The mulch in that garden is white stone, all of the edging is white, and any of the little features in that garden are white. It's soothing in the daytime, but it's vibrant and magical at night, because its position close to the path will bring all of those elements into focus. And the little fairy is actually holding, that's a little light in her, whatever she's carrying. I think it's a flower. I'm not sure where this one is. It was an example of little night gardens, because not everybody can have Lady Cholmondeley's 12 acres. So this is an informal white border, and I really love this one because it's casual. I have this idea. My plan for my gardens is usually that some really clever, hardworking gardener designed them and planted them, and then sort of just wandered off to go work on another project, and so they kind of got a little bit wild. I don't succeed at that. Most of the time my gardens look like a lunatic planted them and then moved away with no forwarding address, but sometimes I get it right. But this one looks like I want my gardens to look. So one of the really clever things about this one is, even though it's just got a grass path and it's basically out in the middle of a yard, it's got this very low white edging all the way around the outside of it that defines it. So if you were walking along at night, even if you couldn't really make out the ground, it's flat, it's level, and you can see where the edges of the path are. And at night, all of those white flowers float, because you can't see their stems.
Oh, yeah.
So they just are hanging in space. And it's really a neat look. This is an example of what I was talking about with the ultraviolet spectrum. And you can't, if you were actually looking at this, you were seeing all of this moving in the breeze in the evening, it would have a more powerful effect. But you can kind of see that the late evening sun hitting those red and purple blooms has this dying fire kind of shimmer to it. So the next most important part of a night garden is fragrance. It is really one of the most seductive aspects of a night garden, and it is seductive by design. Most night blooming plants depend on moths and bats to pollinate. So they want to be very attractive. And they open up at night, they hold on to their fragrance until it gets cool, and then they just start kind of breathing this fragrance out onto the air. Just a few of these plants can literally scent an entire garden. So my very favorite night blooming plant is the moonflower vine. I know there's a lot of different plants that people call moonflowers, but the traditional old-fashioned moonflower is a big morning glory that has no sense of time, basically. They're about the size of a bread plate, and they unfurl by untwisting. It's amazing to watch them in the evening. And they're the quintessential night bloomer. In the drowsy, sultry late summer evenings, large white trumpets unfurl at dusk and waft their delicious scent upon the air, drawing in sleepy hummingbirds for a nightcap and sphinx moths for their first sup of the day. I have, it's too grainy to see because it was really late when I took it, but I was walking to feed my chickens one night, and my moonflowers were blooming in August, and it was really dry and really hot, and there wasn't a whole lot for the hummingbirds to eat, and I must have had 20 on my trellis drinking out of my moonflowers as they were opening up. It was incredible. So other things that are kind of queens and quintessential flowers for night gardens are jasmine, datura, almond verbena, nicotiana, and cereus, which is a night blooming cactus. Others include white roses, Eleagnus, which is a silver foliage plant that has white blooms on it, but you'll never see them. They're tiny and they're tucked into the shrub, but they have this incredible perfume. Then there's white lilies, honeysuckle, gardenia, sweet shrub, Asylum henna, which is kind of a rare plant, but we can actually grow it here in East Texas. And mock orange shrubs, which are also called Philadelphias. Yes?
Can you tell us what's one of those pictures?
Yeah, the top corner one, wait, I have a pointer. Look. Okay, that's jasmine, that's datura, this is almond verbena, and that's nicotiana. Yes, nicotiana is flowering tobacco, I'm sorry. Another thing about night blooming flowers is there is a night blooming flower for every single landscape. So there are lots of water lilies that actually open in the evening for the same reason that certain pollinators want to go to those plants in the evening. Lady Banksia roses are actually open during the day. They don't just open at night. But one of the cool things about a Lady Banksia rose is it spends all of its energy at the tips of the plant. So as it climbs up on a trellis, it has this like little stem that's kind of insignificant compared to how many blooms you get. And if you have them growing up on a trellis in the night, it looks like a cloud because you can't see any supports for it. You can't see the trellis unless you painted your trellis white. But if you've got dark colored, trellises, so you can walk along and they literally look like floating clouds from a distance because there's not a lot of support and they don't spend any effort to put leaves or flowers on their stems. And then this is a night blooming cactus, similar to a cereus. Another thing about desert plants, almost all of them are night blooming and almost all of them are highly fragrant because in the desert it's so hot that a plant can't bother to expend energy blooming during the day. So if they want to attract their pollinators, they have to do it at night. And most bats, especially fruit bats, are the pollinators for cactus. So another thing about night gardens that is really wonderful is that you can use herbs in night gardens and they give you a whole different aspect on those herbs. And the thing that you are most interested in herbs is the fact that they have all of these volatile oils So every time you brush past them, they smell great. When I was a little girl, we lived in a house that had a gate, and right next to the gate, it was a narrow side yard, and the gate from the backyard went into this narrow side yard, and right next to the gate, there was a drippy faucet, and there was a spearmint growing there that was huge. It was taller than me when I was a kid because it just got this constant drip from this faucet that fed it. And it was almost evergreen because it was really protected where it was kind of tucked into the corner. And every time you walked, on the opposite side of it was this lantana that had the little blooms that make the perfect Barbie doll bouquets. So I was constantly going out to get flowers for my Barbies, so my Barbies would have flowers. And I was having to go through this mint bush. So I spent half my childhood with mint, the scent of mint all over me, which is probably one of the reasons I really love herbs. But if you plant herbs close to your pathways, then every time the cat or the dog or you walk past them and brush them, you're going to fill your evening garden with scent. And you probably don't notice that scent as much during the day because there's so many other things going on and you're seeing so many other things and your brain is working. But at night, you will notice those things. Also, there are lots of herbs that are silvery foliaged, curry plants, sages, and then this variegated one in the front here is an apple mint, a variegated apple mint, but there are lots of variegated mints. So there are wonderful plants that not only will scent a garden, but also will have a visual impact. And then don't forget just the plain green guys. I mean, rosemary, you can't see it much at night, but it has an incredible fragrance. Basil is used in a perfume all over the world. It has this amazing fragrance, and all you have to do is touch it. So the scent of herbs linger long on the hand as reward for the caress. Oh, no, you have to go back. Okay, these are moths. Someone asked me if I was going to talk about moths, so I'm going to. These are the angels of the scented night garden. These are sphinx moths, and if you haven't ever seen them, then you really do need to plant some night blooming flowers in your garden because they are such a treat. They are bigger than hummingbirds, and they fly really fast. And they're super strong flyers. They're also one of the few moths that has a fairly long lifespan, so they spend most of their time feeding. So they are busy searching out plants that you would have in a night garden. And they're amazing. So lighting is the second most important thing in a garden. Enhancing your night garden with lighting can add an element of design, style, and whimsy that is not available to gardens in the day. And there are a few important things you need to illuminate at night. One of them is any destination that you're going to. Patios, benches, and other sitting areas that you frequent in the evenings need to be appropriately lit for whatever you're going to be doing there. So if you're just going to be sitting there and listening to music or chit-chatting or having a drink, you can deal with a little bit of low light. If your favorite thing to do to unwind is read, you need to plan for that in a night garden because you want to be out there enjoying what you want to be doing. You want to use this garden as, this decompression space. Paths are another important thing to light because there's nothing less relaxing than falling. So make sure that your walkways are safe and easy to navigate, and that will pull you into your garden at night without having to concern yourself with trip hazards. Focal points and decorative features are also important in a garden. It doesn't take a lot to light them. In fact, there are so many really amazing solar light spotlight options and uplighting options that you can light anything you want to in a garden relatively cheaply. And just a particularly handsome tree is a lovely way, just lighting one is a lovely way to create a destination in your garden and to draw you into the garden and then back out. I had a really pretty old maple in my first house's garden, and I had it uplit with a solar light. And you couldn't see it from anywhere in my garden unless you kind of walked around a corner, so you had to go to it. And a lot of times when I was mulling stuff over in my head, sitting on the patio just seems to, sometimes you have to walk when you need to think. And so I would often walk to that tree and walk back because it was really pretty to look at. This is a really cute little garden, and it's a neat way to use lighting. There's actually no lighting on this path. You can see how dark the far side is, but how important it is to have white stuff at the edge so you don't go wandering off into the shrubs. It kind of stops you, but there is enough light just from these kind of cute things that they've lit up that you can see the whole space. These are another, these are more gardens that are kind of whimsical. The two that are really colorful are actually a garden in Miami that they call the Night Garden, and they change the lighting in it all the time, but it's always really fun like that. And then I loved how they made their tree into a weeping tree with all of the dripping lights. I thought that was really beautiful. So there are lots of fun things you can do with lighting that will create just enough light for you to get around, but it's also fun. So dry gardens are really pretty at night. I know that a lot of people don't think of a cactus garden as something that would be pretty at night, but they are very, very beautiful. The sculptural shape of cacti really benefits from shadow. It emphasizes the shapes. But lighting is super important if you're going to do this in a cactus garden, because you don't want to bang into anything in there. So sound is one of the truly important things about a night garden, because the world is a lot quieter at night. There's not as much activity, and sounds are more powerful and meaningful in the dark. Now this is if you don't live in the middle of town next to the hospital or an airport. And then if you do have the misfortune of having to live in a place where there's a lot of noise at night, covering up the noise you don't want to hear is equally important. So again, sound is still a big thing in a night garden. You are going to notice sounds more, so you might as well have sounds that you like, since you're going to notice them more. Grasses are an amazing sound element because the rustle of grass activates something in our ancestral DNA. There is something primeval about the rustle of grass, because grass rustling could announce a visitor that you want to see or a visitor that might be wanting to eat you. So you can, and your body knows that somewhere, no matter how long you have lived in the modern world and how many ancestors you've had that have lived in cities for the last 500 years, there's something deep inside your bones that knows you should pay attention to the sounds around you at night. So the soft sounds of rustling grass really force you to listen deeply to the night garden, and brings us closer not only to nature, but to the simplest, our simplest and most ancient selves. Fountains are probably the most perfect sound in a night garden. The arrhythmic splash of moving water is deeply soothing at night, and even a small fountain is easy to hear. When softly or brightly lit, it can be a feast for the eyes as well. There is a reason why water is the most sought after sound on calming apps or sound boxes that people use to help them fall asleep. And they've got ocean waves, rain, brooks, all kinds of different water noises. But it's because water really activates something in us that says we're in a safe place and we can be calm. Windchimes are another really lovely thing in a night garden. But you need to make sure that the sound is something that is pleasing to you. Not everybody's going to react well to a small clanging wind chime. Some people love those, and some people don't. So think about what really appeals to you. I have a little tiny wind chime that sounds like bells, and I love it. It's one of my favorite things, and it's really small. I also have a couple of bamboo wind chimes. They sound like the clippity-clop of horses, and I really find that soothing. And then the big ones that are tuned, that they call the cathedral bells, those don't move as much in the wind, so even in a fairly high wind, like 15 miles an hour, they aren't making a huge amount of noise, like a small one will. They're just clanging occasionally. And they have this deep, resonant kind of tone that vibrates you in your chest. And they're expensive, but if that sound really makes you happy and you're going to spend some time outside, it's worth the investment, and they last for years. So I highly recommend them if that is a sound that really makes you happy. Now, there are lots of creatures in the dark too, and they have lots of mysterious and magical sounds. You will hear owls and other birds in the night. You're going to hear a lot of frogs and cicadas and crickets. And there's something really peaceful about that. Even the far-off yip of coyotes at my house, as long as they're far enough away, I think they're lovely. And they keep my cats close to the house, which is a good thing. So the last thing to think about when you are planning or working on a night garden is placement. If you really want to enjoy your night garden, you need to be a part of it. So place your night garden beside your patios, your paths, your most used doors, outside windows that are open at night, or other areas that you're going to frequent anyway. If you put a lot of white paths along your edges, it makes them easier to navigate at night, even without light, because you can see where the edges of it are. Also, place a lot of tactile plants like grasses or plants with scented leaves near your paths. And the more narrow your path is, and the more you kind of have to wind your way through it, the more you're going to activate those scents anyway. So that's always kind of fun. And I really like this really narrow one. I mean, two people couldn't walk down that path at the same time. So it gives you an opportunity to enjoy another dimension of those plants that you don't notice during the day. Now, patios are probably the most important thing to decorate for a night garden, because you're probably going to spend most of your time there. In the evening, you're tired, for one thing. You want to sit down. So try putting, especially if you're kind of easing into night gardening, try your patio first. Do containers with a lot of white plants or scented plants, and see if that's something that really moves you to spend more time outside in the evening. If you plant or position your fragrant plants near frequently opened windows or doors, it's going to bring the beauty of a night garden inside. So there are people who really like to open up their house in the fall or in the spring when the weather's really temperate and kind of air the house out. My grandmother used to say that. Open that door, air the house out. And we don't think about doing that a lot now, but it is actually a really lovely thing to do. And if you're doing it in the evening when you've got some fragrant plants right outside of a window, it's a wonderful way to connect with those plants, even if you're having to do the laundry inside. And then if you plant stuff near a door that you're going to be opening all the time, like me, my entire job now that I'm retired is doorman to my cats, because no matter which side they're on, they're on the wrong side. So my kitchen door, my herb garden is right outside of it, and it's easy for me to enjoy because I'm constantly opening and closing that door. Also, don't forget other destinations and interesting locations at your house. You may have a small pond, you may have a pergola, you may have a gazebo that you don't use that much, but if you make a clear, well-lit path to that place, you may find that those places are completely magical in a totally different way than you enjoy them during the day. And you may find that you actually like them better at night. So paths are, I have a thing about paths. I like doorways and pathways. I want to journey somewhere, and I wander a lot in my life, just in general. So I look at a path as an invitation to wander, and It doesn't even matter if you don't have anywhere to go. Just give yourself a place that you can wander. And then don't forget places to rest, because again, in the evening, you're going to want to be taking some time out from your day. And, you know, what could be nicer than sitting outside, reading a book, drinking a glass of wine, or a cold glass of lemonade on a hot summer evening? William Joyce said, "The garden is a miraculous place, and anything can happen on a beautiful moonlit night." So, one of the things that I said that we would talk about when I planned this and then forgot about, and I put this whole thing together and then reread what I actually wrote that I was going to talk about and had to add the last part of this talk. And was really glad. Design is pretty important in a night garden, and the simpler your design is, the better. So this is a little tiny sliver of a garden. This house actually does not have a front yard. It's like house, and then there's like 8 feet, and then there's road, and it doesn't have a backyard. So they planted an entire garden in their side yard, and it's about 12 feet wide. It's not very wide at all, but it's the length of the house. And as a result, it shows that you can have a really pretty garden in a very tiny space. This garden is beautiful, and it has all the elements that you could ever want in a garden. So people think that elegant means something that's luxurious or expensive or really fancy. But actually, the word elegant means pleasingly ingenious and simple. Elegance is a beauty that shows unusual effectiveness and simplicity. And that is what you want to do with a night garden. No matter how whimsical or casual your style is, start with pleasingly ingenious and simple, and then layer whimsy on top of it. That way everybody will know that you knew what you were doing in the first place. And once you have the basics down, you can let your inner Felder Rushing or Greg Grant go wild. And you can do whatever you want. So simplify your color scheme, simplify your design, and create an elegant space for both day and night. And I'm going to show you a couple of little plans for a night garden. One of them is a small patio garden. Almost everybody has a little patio or a porch off the back of their house that they could set up as a night garden. And this one, there's not much to it. I mean, there are 2 trees in this whole plan, and up in the, again, I have a pointer, I keep forgetting that. Here and here. And then all of the rest of this is just low shrubbery, ferns, and ground cover, and a few spots of color. But this would be a very simple and effective white or silver garden. Again, the path-centric thing in me, they can't help themselves. One of my very first gardens looked almost exactly like this. But again, simple path. In the center of each is a small tree. There are hostas and flowers planted around the outside edges. And then there are ferns and other colorful things planted in each of the corners. But really and truly, it's a very simple design. They're using about 10 different plants in this garden. That's it. That's all that's there. Now, they repeat them over and over again. But it's really simple, very effective, easy to maintain, and can be done on any scale. So these are the resources that I use, and one of these books we're going to give away as in our drawing today. It's Moonlight Gardens by Scott Ogden. But if you are interested in night gardens, I definitely recommend looking into some of these resources. Longwood Gardens has a really lovely night garden resource. And the Fairchild Tropical Botanical Garden is that really bright lit one that I showed you earlier in the picture. And then Gardening Know-How also has a really good reference on planting night and evening gardens. So, does anybody have any questions?
Yes. Do most blooming flowers need to grow in
the sun during the day?
It depends on what they are, but yes, almost all night blooming flowers are full sun or at least 6 hours of sun a day. Very few of them are shade. But a lot of variegated foliage plants are shade plants. So one of the things that people do when they're planting night gardens is they will layer those gardens so you get that floating effect, and you can have your shade-loving plants kind of at the lower level. And because your taller things are going to shade them. Yes?
What are some examples of silver foliage?
Artemisias are silver, and they come in a variety of sizes and a million textures. And then you've got sages are silver, Elaeagnus is silver, lamb's ears are silver. There's only one lamb's ear that does well in Texas, and it's Helen von Stein. What is it? Ann, you're here. What is the lamb's ear we have? Is it Helen von Stein? It's the big one. It handles our humidity better than regular lamb's ear. Curry plants are silver, but there's actually a lot of silver foliage. Azaleas. There's variegated bogs, so there's quite a few. Yes, ma'am. Oh,
Yes, you said that cactus at night, or which pollinators are they? Not cactus?
Mostly it's bats, but they're fruit bats. They're not dangerous, scary bats.
Oh.
But yes, most fruit bats are little and cute. You don't want to pet them. Don't pet them. They do carry rabies occasionally, but there are some bats that are scarier than fruit bats. Fruit bats are tiny. This is actually supposed to say questions on it. I don't know why it doesn't. That's funny. I'll give it later again. I don't know. Does anybody else have a question? Well, I super appreciate you guys listening to me ramble on about night gardens. It is, again, one of my favorite topics, and I did get off track. And I also want to remind you guys that even though the library series is ending, we do have a lot of educational opportunities coming up this summer. In fact, next Friday, the Horticultural Education Committee is putting on a pollinator workshop at the Rose Garden. And June 10th, we have a workshop that's a fundraiser for Smith County Master Gardeners at Glass Recreation. It's called Summer Stars. And there's a flyer about it on the desk. And we also have another one on July 29th at Glass that's called Surviving the Dog Days, Rejuvenating Your Garden in the Heat. So they're going to be timely and important for getting through this hot, apparently dry summer that we're going to have. Thank you. Don't leave.
So we have a few door prizes today to say a final thank you for coming. Paul's going to bring a basket over, and Elizabeth, you're going to do the drawing, right?
Okay. I will draw.
So we're going to match the numbers to the names like we did for the last event.
Number 3 is Belinda, so we have to redraw. Number 50.
Number 50.
50 or 50?
Cheryl Martin.
Oh my
Cheryl
gosh.
Martin.
Oh, yay!
Okay. That's Elizabeth's mom. No ring in there, but we sure are glad she's here.
Right, that's why she's number 50.
Number 24.
It's a lucky number.
For David Fletcher.
Yay.
Number 16.
Barbara Albert.
Oh, now, yeah. Thank you.
Number 23.
Bob Oliver.
This is my first door prize ever.
Number 14.
Carol.
Quisenberry. You are so welcome. And then our last one, the person may not actually want it, so if you don't, let me know. Number 39.
I'm pretty sure you're gonna want it.
Brooks Carroll.
Brooks. Okay. You're getting the trellis that you have to wag home. And on it is a package of moonflower vine seeds from my house.
Okay, the last pitch, guys, on the screen, you'll see the coming events for this summer and next Friday. Next Friday is the first one, then we have one the 10th of June and then the 29th of July. So you need to make a screenshot with your phone so you remember, and then these are just websites that we usually put up for reference.
Is there one on the, is there a flyer? Yeah, there's a flyer on the table. Oh, okay. Yes, there's a flyer on that one too.
And thank you all for coming. We are done. Come again next year.